and welcome back to Nikki's Scrapbooking Adventures. Today we're here with Melanie and we're talking about roadblocks and how we can start to overcome them. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, Nikki. Long time no talk. It's only been a couple of days.
Right. So on Monday, we talked about why we're in roadblocks, when does it happen, and that kind of thing. So today we're going to talk about maybe some tips and tricks to get over those roadblocks. So the first thing we talked about on Monday was no access. So having limited access to supplies. How in the world do we get over that?
Good question. Good question. Now, I know that when I mentioned when I experienced that was quite a few years ago, and I think things have changed significantly. And there are ways that you could be creative without necessarily having a bunch of supplies. So, for instance, you could go digital.
That's true. Or I was thinking maybe even having just a notebook and writing down your ideas so that when you do have access, you've got your ideas already there. Maybe sketch something out, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing I have done is when I've traveled, like on an extended trip, I have taken a little notebook and some minimal supplies with me. So I will take some pocket cards, just because they're cute to do my journaling on, and I can just take a roll of washi tape with me and tape them into the book. So now I've got something a little bit creative, not just straight, journaling. Stickers, if you've got some flat stickers or something like that, you can usually pack quite a few things in a very small container and still be somewhat creative.
Mm-hmm. The other thing you can try to do is memory plan. So I've seen that a lot on the Happy Planner community where they just take their planner, they take some stickers, and they memory plan instead of doing like a scrapbook. So maybe trying a different form.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Another thing I've done, if you're more on the card making side of things, I have also pre-stamped some images and then just taken some colored pencils with me along with those pre-stamped images. And so I've got lots of opportunities to color. And then when I come home, it's just a matter of plopping them on a card and ready to go.
Yeah. The other thing too, like say it's not even like a limited access, it's the amount of money. This community is so generous. And so I'm sure if you were like, hey, I'm in Australia, like in your case, and I just don't have enough money to afford some stuff, they'll probably send you.
Yeah, if you're part of a community. Yeah, if you're part of a community that's local to where you're going to be or whatever, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Facebook is a great way to do that, I think. But
yeah.
Any other ideas for limited access, or should we move on to kind of our emotional section?
Whew. I don't know if I want to talk about emotions, but yeah, I think those are the big things, right? Like just take a limited amount of supplies if you can. If you are doing something like moving and you're going to have a period of time without, maybe pack a small iris bin or something like that with a bunch of supplies. Plan ahead, I guess, is probably the biggest tip, right? Think about what you can take with you and plan ahead. Okay, let's move on to the emotional topic.
So if you watch Monday's video, we both talk about how our surroundings affect our scrapbooking or our creativity, right? Like negative emotions impact how creative we can be. And so trying to get over that is going to be a big hurdle.
It for sure is. And in my particular case, the emotional situation happened a few years prior, and I had reached a point, because I was scrapbooking chronologically, where I had to scrapbook that event, or in quotation marks, had to. And I just didn't want to do it. And so I just stopped scrapbooking altogether. When I finally clued in that was the reason, was that I just didn't want to scrapbook, I just had to do an assessment of like what's going on. And I realized that I was imposing rules on myself that I didn't have to follow, right? I was saying I had to scrapbook this next event because it was the next thing to scrapbook. But there's nothing that says I have to scrapbook that way. I could have skipped over the event. I could not scrapbook it at all. Or I could modify how I scrapbooked it. So there's a few different ways there to approach it. And I have actually, as a result of this, stopped scrapbooking chronologically. And I scrapbook with whatever I feel inspired to scrapbook at the moment. And that has made a big difference. Now, someone might argue that you're not necessarily going to capture all the stories that way, and that you may not be authentically documenting your life if you gloss over some of the more difficult points in your life. But you know what? It's my story and I can tell it how I want.
Right? They talk about in history, the winner always gets to share the story and the victory, right? So you can gloss over whatever you want. It's your story.
Yeah. And it was already 2 years after the situation had happened, and it was, any documenting I did would be through that lens, right? That lens of having 2 years of a break. The emotions, while they were still there, were not as raw as they were in the moment. So you could argue that it's never going to be truly authentic anyways, but my goal is not for it to be authentic in the moment of every aspect of my life. Sometimes it's nice to have something documented in the moment because it tells a different story. But I think there's also value in time and reflection back on time and telling that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in my case, it was after my son passed away and COVID hit. I had to find new inspiration. And that ended up happening with my other son, my second son, who's alive and well today. So, finding a different source of inspiration. At one point, I mean, this is not related to scrapbooking, but I was a smoker and I had to figure out a way to be inspired not to smoke anymore. And so finding inspiration, figuring out a reason why you're documenting. My new reason is for my son. Also, I like telling my own stories, and my family has a history of Alzheimer's. You guys are learning all about me.
Up close and personal. Up close and personal.
My family has a history of Alzheimer's, and so I'm scared that I'm going to lose my childhood memories. And so I make it a priority to document those as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I ended up actually just reframing my story, and I did not include all the pictures I would have in the moment. And I don't feel bad about that. If I ever feel like I need to go back and tell more of it from maybe an in the moment kind of perspective, I still have the photos. I can still re-document it or document it from a different lens, if you want to call it that, and add that in. I don't think I feel that need at this point. I feel quite happy with how I did approach it. And just by removing some of those photos and reframing the story, actually allowed me to move on. And so I would encourage those of you that are stuck, at a certain point. Number one, does it have to be documented right now? Because if you're not feeling it, there's no sense forcing it. And then the other one is if you do feel compelled to tell that story, but you're struggling with how to tell it, realize you could tell the story multiple times with different frames, and they don't all have to be told, or lenses, I guess is probably a better way of putting it. They don't all have to be told at the same time either. So just what you feel is most important in the moment.
Right. And so documenting my son's history, I've done the several pages on YouTube, but then I've stopped. I haven't touched it again because I'm getting towards the harder parts, and I just don't want to revisit at this point in time. Even though it's been 3 years now, it's too raw.
Yeah. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. There's no scrapbook police that are going to come around and say, you have to document it right now. And yep. And I think that's another key for just all of this in general. When we have roadblocks and stuff like that, just be careful you're not imposing rules on yourself that don't need to be imposed. Give yourself the grace and the freedom to approach the hobby however you feel in the moment. And there's no right or wrong. Anything you do is better than nothing, right? And at the end of the day, the stories that get told, and those that don't, there's going to be stories that aren't told, and you're never going to be able to tell all of them, and that's okay. That's all right.
Yep. Just like a visual triangle. You don't need to do a visual triangle like everybody else does. There's no rules.
You can break the rules, right? Well, and especially for something like scrapbooking, where there literally are no rules, they're only what you make for yourself. So you have the power to change that.
Yep. So our next topic is burnout, where we've created so much stuff and our creativity has died because we've made so much stuff, just burnt out.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, so there's creativity burnout, and there's also just life burnout. You've maybe in a season of your life where you have so many outside pressures. You've got young kids, a full-time job, a sick parent or other relatives that need your help, and you just don't have the time or capacity, or at least you feel you don't, to add one more thing on your plate. So that's kind of the next topic, is how do we still try and be somewhat creative when we have all these added pressures, or do we?
I say take a break. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as you stop buying while you're taking that break, right? So you don't get overwhelmed, because what can happen is, say you take a break, but now your second hobby is buying all this stuff. You come into your room and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much that I need to use. That guilt happens.
Oh, that
So
guilt. That guilt.
sounds like Melanie is talking from experience.
I actually don't have a ton of guilt, to be honest. Every now and then I do, because I do have a lot of stuff. But I ironically feel more guilt when people point it out than internally. When people say things, oh, you have a lot of stuff, like, kind of in that tone, that judgy kind of tone. And I always feel like I have to defend myself. But really, when those people are not in my periphery, I love having all of this stuff. It gives me joy to sit in this room and just look at what I have. I find it very inspiring, and I just, I love all of it. But I'm with you. I think if you need a break, or, you just don't have that capacity at this point, I think you just have to acknowledge that that's the season of life that you're in, and that's okay. And, realize that if this is truly something you value, that you will pick it up again when circumstances are a little bit more conducive to being creative.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And try not to get overwhelmed. I mean, it happens though. Too much stuff can overwhelm you. Too many projects, too many photos, things like that can overwhelm you. But my encouragement to you is to take it one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
That's what they do in the organizing community. They take one section of a closet at a time, they reorganize it, and then get rid of it. So if that's something that you think you need to do because you have too much stuff and that's what's overwhelming you, take it one section at a time.
Yeah. And I think you can apply that kind of concept to all of these things, is break it down into smaller subsets, right? So for instance, if you have a big craft room full of supplies and you don't know where to start, maybe pull a kit from your supplies, make your own little subset kit, a few things that are inspiring to you, and just focus on those items and forget that you have everything else. And you'll be amazed that when you have those items selected, how creative you can be with just those items.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I know in my tower of paper that you guys saw last month, there's collections that are like calling my name, like, hey, Nikki, you should make something with me. Hey, Nikki, make something with me. That's the next collection that I'm going to pull out.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same can be said for like photos. If you have a ton of photos, pick the ones that you're excited about. Quite often they're photos that are recent, right? So don't worry about the ones from 2010 that aren't quite finished. If those are not inspiring you at the moment, and those feel more like that they're ones that you have to scrapbook because you have to scrapbook them, just leave them. They've been sitting for 13 years. They can sit for a little while longer, and do something that does spark joy, make you excited about the hobby, and document those.
And that's why I like my binder system for my photos that I shared with you guys last month, because I can flip through that and find the inspiration in there. And my photos I know are safe, they're dated, and I can always come back to them later.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I've used when I have too much of something, so for instance, too many inspiring ideas, I do still use Pinterest quite regularly. I will go through there and I will pin anything that I see that's inspiring to one of my boards. It allows me again to condense the world of inspiration into things that I have already recognized are inspiring. And then when I do need that inspiration, I can just quickly go to the board, flip through it, and pick out something, or even just flipping through it is inspiring. And for projects, another thing that I've done is I've kept like a little traveler's notebook kind of thing. And every time I have an idea of something I want to scrapbook, I just write it in the notebook. And just the fact of me writing it down allows it to be released from my brain, right? So now I don't have to remember that I want to scrapbook that. It's written down and I can let it go and free up my brain space for other things.
Oh, I did that last night when I had my to-do list to clean my house. I had to print my photos and get them all organized, like sweep the floor, just being able to relax your brain by writing it down is definitely helpful.
Yeah. So those are kind of things that I think I would typically employ if I'm feeling overwhelmed. Definitely the too much stuff. Sometimes you just got to purge, get the stuff out that just doesn't inspire you anymore. It hurts to say that in today's age when price is going up on everything. But if you're like me, I have more than enough stuff. And I'd rather that it go to somebody who perhaps can use it instead of have it sit here, for another 10 years gathering dust.
Mm-hmm. Have a crafty garage sale. That's always the best because then you're looking for stuff that will sell at a good price.
There you go.
But the next topic is just being uninspired. You're sitting around, your paper doesn't do it for you. Your embellishments are photos and you're just kind of meh about life.
Okay, so I want to know what your big tip is. How do you get out of the meh phase? She's like, I don't know. I'm kind of in that right now.
I just start, honestly.
Yeah.
So you need to create for yourself. And that's like the number one thing, right? So sometimes I get that meh because I'm procrastinating and don't want to get a YouTube video up. I know that's not what everybody does here, but just standing in my clean space, I think that's part of it, right? You get to your desk and you're like, oh my gosh, it's not clean anymore. Cleaning it, I think helps.
Yeah.
And then just making something for yourself. It doesn't have to be a scrapbook page. It could be like a mixed media page in a notebook or something, but just creating something that the end product is beautiful definitely helps, I think.
So I think you've actually started on a point there that I've actually used quite a bit, and I just do something different. So it's along that lines of just do something. So I do quite a bit of cards and scrapbooking. So that helps to keep the inspiration going because I flip back and forth. But if I'm really in a funk, I will cross stitch, or I will pull out another hobby. I've got a couple of quilts I want to make. So I will do something like that just gives me a break from this, and that gives me the time to reframe my mind so that when I do come back into the space, things look new, right? Mm-hmm. I've got a fresh set of eyes when I'm looking at what's in my space. So I would encourage you to do that too. Like if you've got something, another hobby that you can engage in, maybe just engage in that for a period of time to give yourself a little bit of breathing room from the one that's, not inspiring you at the moment. Mm-hmm. I also will use organizing as a way of giving myself a break. So like you, when you said I need a clean desk, those are types of things that you can do. Clean your desk, go through a drawer, purge a pile of papers, that as you're going through your supplies, that in itself can often be inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And then I'm part of Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram and YouTube. Maybe unsubscribing to one or two would help you so that you can narrow down what your style is. Maybe your style is changing. Try a different style.
Yeah, it really does. There's no one answer, is there? Right? Mm-hmm. You may be uninspired because you've always done the same thing and you need to try something new. or maybe you've been trying too much new stuff and you're getting discouraged because none of it's working. So you need to just kind of narrow down what it is that does work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well,
it's all about knowing yourself.
It is. It's such a personal journey. It's such a personal journey. If you guys have any tips or suggestions for people who have stopped scrapbooking or card making or crafting in general, please list them down below. We would love to be able to have a conversation with you about it. So October, we're talking about untold stories. Melanie, we're getting pretty deep here in these trenches, talking about roadblocks and untold stories. I think we're going to learn more about that 2010 incident.
Well, it's 2004.
That was 2004. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It happened. I hit it in 2010, but the story itself was from 2004. And I actually think I've told that story well enough. I don't know that I need to revisit that one, but I do have a lot of untold stories, and so it'll be an interesting conversation.
Yep. So definitely stay tuned for October. Definitely check out Monday's video where we talk about what roadblocks we've experienced. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.